That's the way I see it.
That's where I see it.
That's the way I see it.
That's the way I see it.
That's the way we see it.
That's the way I see it.
That's the way I see
That's the way
it.
I see it.
That's why I see it.
Welcome to this episode of The Way I See It. I'm your host, Austin Darga, and on today's episode, we'll be talking with Courtney Gilbert, a case manager for community mental health. Her hard work and dedication has really made an impact on the lives of the disability community, but her personal and powerful story about why she feels so passionate about it will really explain it all. Hey Courtney, glad to have you here. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So, Courtney, you work for a local agency here in northern Michigan called Community Mental Health. So, could you tell us what Community Mental Health /CMH is and the services they provide?
Yes, well, Northern Lakes Community Mental Health provides a range of services. We provide health services, crisis services, and they just opened up GT Mental Health Crisis and Access Center at 410 Brook Street. So I want to give a shout out about that. They provide psychiatric pre-admission screenings, peer support services, referrals to community services and outpatient therapy, face-to-face crisis intervention, and behavioral health assessments. We also provide child and family services with autism services until children are, well, they're not children anymore, I guess, until they're 21 years old, CLS and respite and home-based services, mental health therapy and counseling for parents and children, health services that include medication review, medication administration, partial hospitalization services and assessments, adult clinical services, which could be, we have an ACT team. It's called Assertive Community Treatment, which helps with medication and provides behavioral health therapy, which allows people living with serious mental illness to maintain their independence. We have a behavioral treatment review committee, nursing home assessments, adult foster care placement and monitoring, occupational therapy, nursing services, referrals for speech and language and physical therapy, psychiatry, psychological services. I mean, we offer a lot, I guess. So, and then case management too, obviously.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it sounds like they're really working hard to meet the needs and benefits of each individual that they serve, which is just absolutely great. I think we all could use that in our lives. And I also want to give a shout out as well to Child and Family Services because my family has a personal connection to them. So thank you for all of the work that you're doing and for all of the help that you've given us and the people that you have served as well. So Courtney, speaking of case management, that leads me to my next question. What is your role as a case manager at CMH? What do you do?
Well, I'm responsible for treatment planning and supports coordination to make sure that services are delivered. So typically families come through our access and they share with access the services that they're looking for. And then if they meet medical necessity, they get passed along to a case manager like myself. And then I work with the family to establish, it's called an individual plan of service. And if someone is looking for a community job, if they're looking for community living supports, we establish what's called an individual plan of service. We get those services, so I will link them with providers that can deliver the needed services. GTI is a perfect example of that. So they provide day programming, and you could work in Enclave if you're looking for employment. That would be like a job in the community, or they have work here in the building. And then I continue to just work with the client, talk with the families, make sure that they're continuing to have their needs met. And lots of times the IPOS is an annual plan, but we do periodic reviews. Sometimes the needs increase throughout the year and we have to revisit the plan. and just continually checking and making sure clients' needs are met.
Wow. So it sounds just like an IEP, which they have at school. And for those who aren't familiar with what an IEP is, an IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan for special needs students who have disabilities or who might have some different needs than other students in school. And then once they graduate school, this is like the next step to the future when it comes to employment or daily living. Services like Courtney provides are available through CMH to help families and individuals of those families facing certain situations with that. So I'm really glad that you're able to provide that for people. So moving forward here, how did you get involved in the field of disability services?
Well, it's I don't know if it's a funny story. I think so. So one night late, I was at home in my pajamas and I just opened my computer and I was looking through different job postings and I came across adult IDD case manager. And I thought, why the heck not? No, I was not at all qualified.
But you got to start somewhere, right?
Absolutely. And so on a whim, I applied. And within a few days, I got a call to come in. I had done all of my research on the agency, the position. I had prepared a list of questions that I might be asked and prepared answers. I had prepared a list of questions that I was going to ask them. And I felt super confident that I was going to do really well. And apparently I did, because within several days I was called back. The first adult foster care home that I went into, I worked with a client who was nonverbal, who was total care, and she had cerebral palsy. And I left that home thinking, what the heck did I get myself into? I'm in over my head. I cannot do this. But the more I got to know her, I found out we both had a love of the Vampire Diaries and Stefan and his brother. And I just found out that there are different ways that you can communicate with people and get to know people. And I just absolutely fell in love with this job. And I really honestly didn't think I would, because when I left there, I was terrified and thinking, is everybody going to be, are all my clients going to be nonverbal? Are all of them going to be total care, hands-on? And that was absolutely not the case. So I'm glad that I stuck with it, because I absolutely wouldn't trade this job for anything. After 8 years, I absolutely love it.
Wow. Well, that's what life is all about. Just push yourself to the max. I mean, of course, don't push yourself too hard, but sometimes you do have to challenge yourself to get to where you want to be in life. And it sounds like this ended up being a serious calling for you. And I can tell you from personal experience, going to school all these years with a variety of different peers, I definitely know several peers with many different situations, disability or not. And, now that I'm working for a company that specializes in employing adults with disabilities, it has really helped me come a long way, and it has touched me in more ways than I can imagine. And I can't be any more thankful for what my staff and everybody that I've worked with, that I'm working with now, and who I've worked with in the past have done for me. It's truly been a blessing for me, and I can definitely tell that it has been a blessing for you as well. Speaking of that, because you worked so hard to get to where you are, why are you so passionate about working with the disability community?
Well, it's strange. I really think that from the time I was very young, I was always struck by how people that were different from me were treated. And I noticed this in school. There was one peer in particular. His name was Charles. And he had these Coke bottle rimmed glasses. And there was just something about him that was different. And I honestly, because I was so young, I don't know what it was about him that was different. But he was treated differently by all of my peers. He was teased. He was taunted. I think he came from an abused home, because he came to school with bruises, I remember. And the teachers weren't very nice to him. And I think I've always been drawn to people that are different. And I've always, when I became a mother, that was something that I told my daughter that, you always need to be nice to everyone because you don't know what their situation is.
Sure.
So whether someone looks different, they dress different. And I remember she had this little boy in her preschool class. His name was Chris, and he was special needs. And she made a point the first day that she met him in preschool of walking up to him because he was louder. He was, bouncing off the walls. And she made a point to go right up to him to shake his hand and say, "Hi, my name's Emma. What's your name?" And she and Chris became friends for the entirety of the time that they were in school together. And I just have always made a point to just look out for people like that. And that was probably because of the way I was raised. My mother was a social worker. She had a very soft heart. And it just always struck me that there's no reason to treat people differently. My mom would, when we would be out in the community, she always told me not to stare. And she said, if you have a question, I think the parents would appreciate if you would ask them. Because staring is rude. But if you want to know, go ask. And then as I got older, I had people say the same thing. And even when I started here, I would have guardians say, I would so much rather people ask me what's wrong with my child than staring. So I just, and always think that could be me. That could be my child. So I don't know. I've just always had, I think, a soft heart for people.
Wow. Well, what you just said was very, very powerful and touching. And the part that you shared that where you talked about your daughter making this friend in school, like really, that just really almost brought tears to my eyes because with the way that a lot of our, younger generations are raised today, some people are getting that, some people are not. However, we have gotten better with that over the years. And I've talked about this with several guests on the show from the last season. As a matter of fact, we actually talked about this with my last guest that I've had, Rick Sebastian, who is the president and CEO of an organization in Connecticut that works with people with disabilities from across the country and around the world as well. We were talking about this very similar thing. And I, too, growing up in school, had some interesting experiences that I have shared in the podcast in the past as well. And I gave a speech about it back in June of last year, 2024. I think you were there for that. Mm-hmm. And, just being able to talk about what my story was in school, how I was first treated in kindergarten to how that improved as I've gotten older. I mean, I'm really glad that you were able to share this because that's such a deep connection that we have, because I was raised the same way that you were. And that has always been my calling in life, to look out for people, help someone in need. And with us just celebrating Martin Luther King Day this past Monday, which not everybody recognizes it. They look at it as more of just a day off work and to celebrate and party. Woohoo! But if you took the time to think about what Martin Luther King stood for, which I have always encouraged other people to do throughout these last few episodes, because I live by his phrase that he used every day in his I Have a Dream speech, which I've mentioned on the show a couple times, which is we should not judge people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I'll share with you a really quick story before we move forward here. Back in September, when I was in Washington, D.C. with Rick Sebastian and his crew, we got the opportunity to take the Monuments by Moonlight bus tour and stop at the Lincoln Memorial. And when we all got off, Rick and I got to stand on the step where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, which was such a very powerful moment in my life. And the trip that we took was the best and most memorable trip of my lifetime. So I'm very, very thankful for that. So I really appreciate you sharing that story. That was like the best thing that I've heard all week.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. I think I left out another thing as I got older that helped me. I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 15, and I had just moved from Pennsylvania to Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I was brand new to middle school at the time. We hadn't lived there for very long, and I had a seizure. So here I am, the new kid at a school. I have a seizure. I was totally terrified of how I would be received. I actually was so amazed that I just had kids asking me a lot of questions, and I didn't even know. I remember going to the neurologist at U of M, and a lot of the children in the office there were wearing helmets, were in wheelchairs, because it was anybody that had any neurological problems. But I started crying, and I turned to my mom, and this was in the mid-'80s, so we weren't using PC language yet. There wasn't PC language. I turned to her and I said, Mom, does this mean I'm retarded? Because we weren't saying intellectual developmental disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, absolutely not. But I thought, am I going to have to wear a helmet? I was just terrified. I didn't understand what it meant to have epilepsy, but I was met with a lot of love and compassion, which I'm thankful for. But I recognize that not everybody is met with that. So I was very lucky. For years, even probably well into my 30s, I was in denial about having epilepsy subconsciously. I knew I had it, and I took medication for it, but I didn't always take my medication. And even throughout high school, there were times when I probably had seizures that I otherwise wouldn't have if I was, if I had good sleep hygiene, if I was taking my medication when I was supposed to. There's so many things that can contribute to having seizures. And there were lots of things I missed out on because I couldn't drive. When you have a seizure, you can't drive for 6 months. That's just about the worst time that a young person can be diagnosed with epilepsy, right when they're about to get their driver's license. So I couldn't drive all the time. So I think that's also contributed to my being more, empathetic towards people.
Well, you and I are definitely on the same page as that, because it takes a lot of courage to be able to recognize who you are. I went through that same thing growing up as a child, going to school. I always had trouble. Well, when I was really young, I had a lot of trouble advocating and speaking up for myself, and to the point where it ended up being one of my goals on my IEP. And luckily, I was able to improve that for myself as I've gotten older. And now that I have graduated school and have gone to work, it really gave me the opportunity to shine and try things on my own and discover things and have more logic to think through things, and being able to share my story and talk about it with people through the podcast and through public speaking events that I've done for the past year and a half, especially with becoming the spokesperson of my local company here, GTI, has really helped me out a lot. I feel a lot better about myself. I have gained a lot of confidence through that over time, and I'm really happy to be moving forward and gain more strengths and confidence with the goals that I've always wanted to reach. So I totally understand what you feel about that. And I'm also glad that you were able to bring up the issue of epilepsy as well. I want to start by saying that I'm really sorry that you have this condition, but I do think it's important to bring awareness. I would encourage everyone that if you are out somewhere and you see somebody with that condition, or you see somebody in distress, I think that it's really crucial that you do some research and know what to do in that situation, and be a good Samaritan and just give a helping hand, especially with the personal traumatic experience that I had with somebody with epilepsy, which I will share with you now. So a couple of years ago during the summer, I was a part of a summer group at Disability Network, which is a local organization here in town where we are. And we were doing a shopping lesson. Of course, it was a class that helped you for when you graduate school. It helped you with employment, and it helped you through with different social community things. for getting out and learning different situations to interact with people. Well, anyway, we were doing a shopping lesson at Target, learning how to spend our own money and shop for what we needed for school. And I was partnered up with a friend. We were getting our things, spending our own money, and doing budgeting. And when we reached the checkout lane, when everybody gathered back together and we were putting our stuff on the conveyor belt, I heard this really loud crash because her and I, we had all our bags in our hands. And the next thing I know, my friend was right at my feet on the floor shaking. And it ended up being a fight or flight situation for me at that moment. I wasn't sure what to do. I just stopped dead in my tracks because I knew that there was something serious and unusual going on that wasn't supposed to be. And I kind of struggled to speak at first, but then I said something to staff, but luckily they were on top of it and they took care of the situation. But that was one of the most scary, traumatic experiences that I've ever faced. And so ever since then, I've done my research on people with seizures and epilepsy to know how to help somebody possibly one day if they're facing a situation or if they're facing any other emergency situation, whether it's an allergy or a panic attack or anxiety attack or whatever. If I see someone in that situation, my promise is to take an oath to try to help someone through that however I can, whether it's talking them through it, whether it's asking for help or calling 911, doing anything. And I would encourage anybody else to do the same. So just do your research and learn about different things like that, because you never know what you're going to come across, especially when you go out in public. So I really commend you for being able to discuss that with me today. So moving forward, before we wrap up here today, what would you say your favorite part of your job is at CMH?
Oh, that's easy. Watching people succeed. And I would say, well, since you're here with me, I can use you for one example. You shared with me, what you wanted to do. And initially it wasn't, I can kind of rat you out, but it wasn't necessarily to work at GTI.
Right.
But I was able to kind of connect you to Micah, who was able to connect you with somebody else, Dana Ryan, who ultimately was, between the two of them, able to really get you doing what you want to do, which is being the spokesperson and advocate for GTI and doing the podcasts. And I know, radio is really what you like. So I can't actually take credit for us being here today doing this, but through going to GTI, it kind of got you to where you wanted to be. And I guess just seeing people succeed. Another thing I like doing is going into the community with clients, going shopping with them and watching them like ahead of time, putting a grocery list together and just watching people grow in their independence. I've had some clients since I've been at CMH, which is 8 years. So I've been with them for the entirety of my time here. And the first year, I would say they couldn't clean. They couldn't put a grocery list together. They struggled to do things. And now 8 years later, we're going out and they're ordering off a menu and they're paying for their bill and they're figuring out, okay, how much is 10% or 15% of my meal? So this is how much of a tip I have to leave. Or they're able to say, okay, if I'm putting my grocery list together, Courtney, I shouldn't just make a list of everything I need. Maybe I should put like my dairy items together and put eggs and milk and butter and yogurt in a category. And then we'll go to the dairy section together. So just watching people grow. It's amazing. That's my favorite part. It's not the paperwork, despite what people might think. It's not writing the plans of service. It's interacting with the client. It's coming to GTI. It's watching people work. It's watching them in activity. It's spending time with clients and just seeing that personal growth over time and the successes. and maybe moving from, one job to another job because they've figured out how to do this one job and now they're done with that. So they move on to something else. So it's just all those successes. And to some people, they may be like, well, that's not a big deal, Courtney. So they can categorize their grocery list, but that is huge for some people. So yeah, it's just all those successes.
Yeah. And, more people really should wake up and realize that, because unless they have experienced that themselves, they don't know how much of a big deal it is to help someone grow and see someone grow and thrive in their confidence, reaching the goals and doing what they want to do. And I myself am very proud and honored to have you as my case manager. I know, I advocated to you and with the goals that I did want to reach, but you truly have helped me come a long way and have helped me grow my confidence and be stronger in myself than I was even, 2 years ago, 5 years ago when I was last in school. And so I truly mean this from the bottom of my heart. If it wasn't for people like you, I'm not really sure where this country would be. I don't know where the world would be. And people in the disability community are successful and are able to be successful because of hardworking people like you. So keep up the good work. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And you have definitely touched my life in more ways than one. So I really appreciate everything that you've done for me and everything that you've done for us here at GTI and our community as well. So thank you for being here today, Courtney.
Well, thank you very much. And that did get a tear out of me. I might not have gotten a tear out of you, but you got one out of me.
Oh, trust me, when sharing that story about your daughter almost did get a tear out of me. I mean, they say a man isn't supposed to cry, but I'm not ashamed to get my feelings out. And I've definitely learned that over time is with the self-advocacy piece. So, and hey, if it means crying and showing your real emotions through excitement or whatever, so be it, because it just shows people who you are and how you feel. And that's what we try to stand for every day here on The Way I See It.
Thank you, Austin.
You're most certainly welcome. Thank you for listening to The Way I See It. This podcast is brought to you by Grand Traverse Industries, a Northern Michigan nonprofit whose mission is to fiercely advocate, strengthen, and advance the dignity and opportunity of people with disabilities. Our theme is composed by Nick Vane and our producer is Micah Haven. We hope you'll join us for our next episode, but in the meantime, this is Austin Darga reminding you that life is a journey. No matter where it takes you, always go where your heart leads you.